You know the image, right? The knight in shining armor. The hero on the noble steed, fighting for things like glory and honor. It all sounds so
Powerful, right? I mean, this lone figure, completely encased in steel, a walking fortress who could single-handedly turn the tide of a battle, a true force to be reckoned with.
and of course, respected. This was someone who commanded authority, not just on the battlefield, but in people's hearts and minds. They were admired for their bravery, for their unwavering code of chivalry. Yeah, absolutely legendary. The stuff of myths we've been telling for centuries. But here's the thing about legends. They almost always leave out the really ugly parts. Because that whole romantic fairy tale image of the knight, it's just that, a story. The reality, the reality was a short, brutal life defined by pain, crushing debt, and just constant, grinding pressure. And this journey didn't start with some noble quest. No, it began with the total sacrifice of a childhood. From the age of 7, a boy training to be a knight was essentially property. His life just wasn't his own anymore. And forget about reading and writing. The curriculum for Future Knight was all about 3 brutal lessons. Discipline that was so harsh it was basically abuse. Endless combat training where getting injured wasn't a risk, it was a given. And absolute unquestioning obedience. This wasn't about building character. It was about forging a human weapon. So by the time a young man was finally knighted, he wasn't some bright-eyed idealist ready for an adventure. He was a survivor. He was already conditioned for a life defined by pain. And believe me, the worst was yet to come. Okay, let's talk about that iconic suit of armor. To us, it's a symbol of strength. But for the man inside, it was an instrument of torture. A self-imposed prison he had to wear into the most dangerous place on Earth, a medieval battlefield. Just let that number sink in for a second. 20 to 30 kilograms. That's like strapping a small child to your body and then being told to run, fight, and survive for hours. The exhaustion alone was a weapon used against you before you even saw the enemy.
It was a complete sensory nightmare. In the summer, that metal suit became a literal oven. You could easily get heat stroke. Just breathing was a constant struggle. And then the fighting started, and it was pure chaos. The deafening clang of steel, the screams, the sheer violent struggle just to stay alive inside what was basically a metal coffin.
And what if you got wounded? You know, we have this romantic idea of a knight surviving with a noble scar. The reality could not be more different. In a world with zero understanding of germs or antibiotics, even a minor cut from a dirty blade could turn into a raging infection, and an infection was often a death sentence. Your biggest enemy wasn't the other guy's sword, it was the bacteria on it.
So they went through all this for what? For wealth? For power? Hardly. We tend to assume all knights were rich lords, but that's just another part of the myth. For many, becoming a knight was a one-way ticket to financial ruin.
The very equipment you needed to be a knight, the armor, the weapons, a war horse, was astronomically expensive. Think of it like this. It's the medieval equivalent of your boss telling you that you need to buy your own fighter jet just to do your job. Just look at this balance sheet. A knight's assets were his tools of war and his honor, and you couldn't buy a loaf of bread with either of those. His liabilities? A mountain of debt for that same equipment. A lot of knights were really just mercenaries, fighting constantly just to stay one step ahead of the people they owed money to. And as if the physical pain and the financial stress weren't enough, there was this immense psychological burden. The famous knightly code of honor, it wasn't a noble guide. It was an impossible, crushing standard to live up to. I mean, think about what that actually means. You are never allowed to be tired. You are never allowed to be scared. You can't show a single moment of weakness, even when you're facing certain death. This code of honor, it stripped them of their basic humanity. It was a cage for the mind, just as the armor was a cage for the body. So what was the reward for a lifetime of suffering? Was it glory? For a select few, maybe. But for the vast majority, the reality was a life of servitude to some lord, ending in an anonymous death on some forgotten battlefield. Their sacrifices were just lost to history. Ultimately, this was not a life of adventure. It was a life of constant grinding anxiety. It was the daily acceptance that every single sunrise could very well be your last. So that leaves us with a really critical question. When we strip away all the romance and just look at the brutal reality, the stolen childhood, the physical agony, the crushing debt, the psychological torment, are we really looking at a hero? Or are we looking at a victim of a brutal system sacrificed for a legend they could never, ever truly live up to?